So hi all.
Hello. I was just going to introduce myself really quickly before we get going. I'm Oliver Townsend. I'm the Head of Partnerships and Practice at Platform, but also the Wales lead for the New System Alliance. So the New System Alliance is a group of organisations, initially a group of organisations of partners who set up a New System Alliance, which is looking at how we can completely and utterly change systems that at the moment are keeping people locked into a traumatising, ineffective system. And it's going beyond that now. So it's now a group of people of any level in an organisation who are coming together to try and talk about and find ways through this failing system. And that's me.
Fabulous, thank you. So even in your introduction, there's loads to ask you about. So I think you said something like to completely dismantle. Did you say dismantle, or you said something like to completely overhaul?
Total change, I think.
Total change, yeah. So in the presentation that I did a while ago, I talked about Meg Wheatley's two loops model. So how there's the old system running as the new system emerges. And within that, there are all the actors. So the people in the old system who are still keeping the ship sailing. So as we talk about, changing the wheel as the car's still driving. So there's people still driving the car while you and your New System Alliance partners are bringing in the change. So just wanted to ask you about those two things, really. Like, how do you overhaul a system that is still running? And also, how do you help people then change from the old to the new whilst moving?
Yeah, so I think we're still feeling our way through it as the New System Alliance. We're still trying to find out the best ways forward. I think the first thing I'd say is we don't know what the answer is, if even there is one answer. So I'll just answer as me, really, for now. For me, I think you have to have compassion and understanding and empathy for people who are currently in the system. And that's not just the people that we're working with, but also support workers, frontline practitioners, mental health practitioners. Because it probably doesn't need to be said, but sometimes I think we do need to say it. People care. People don't go into these roles to work in a failing system. People don't deliberately choose to do things that are ineffective or directly harmful in some cases. People take low-paid jobs or lower-paid jobs with very little opportunity for promotion because they like to work with people and they like to make a difference and help. So I think the first thing is we've got to recognise that humans are part of the system and that humans do things for human reasons. So that's kind of point one. Point two, I think, is and again, I found Margaret Wheatley's model that you described really inspiring because she talks about networking, getting a group of like-minded people together, forming those connections, and then almost spinning off new ideas and new models. And that's what we're trying to do really at the moment. So the New System Alliance is in that connecting, forming networks kind of position. And the aim is eventually we will then create communities of practice, which is a posh way of saying people who care about the same things and get together to make it happen. And then using those communities of practice then to create new ways of working. And what I think is really magical about the New System Alliance, in a way that I don't think it's normal to use the word magical when you're talking about policy, do you? But for me, I'll keep using it, is that it's thinking about a way to get to a certain place where people can access services as human beings, talk to other human beings, and services act in a kind, helpful way without traumatizing or infantilizing people. Now, this is the magical point. What makes the new system magical is that we're not set on one particular way of doing that. There are probably lots of different ways to do it. So I think, I'm not sure if that's answered your question, but the first one would be listen to people, treat people as humans, both within and outside the system. And secondly, that there's no single route. So what's the old phrase? All roads lead to Rome. Well, most roads lead to new systems change.
Yeah, fabulous. So can you tell us a bit about the wisdoms? Because I know that's informed a lot of what you just said.
Yeah, so it was initially created by Mayday Trust, who were the lead partner of the New System Alliance. And to be honest, I find wisdom's incredibly inspiring, actually, and not in the sort of mawkish kind of poverty porn sort of way, just in the sense that it involves a very specific way of listening to people, really deep listening, one that, I think whether this is the correct way of describing it, seems to me a little bit like ethnographic research. So people will sit and be with people as they're either going through the system or working in the system. And just undertake a deep listening exercise. They won't make any judgments. They will just listen, learn, take notes. And after all of those notes, they produce a report. And I think there have been several that have produced wisdoms for the system, wisdoms from behind closed doors, wisdom for the streets. And they tell us what the people we support, the people we work with, either colleagues or people we support, what they're really experiencing, so the unvarnished truth, I suppose. And a lot of the time they don't tell us hugely new things, but they do tell us it in ways and words that we can't ignore. And I think one of the things we're really good at in policy and practice is hiding from the emotions and the pain of the reality of services. So, and it's understandable because we don't want to confront failure and, trauma, but we find, service user or co-production or engagement, we find lovely fluffy words to mask the idea that actually we're working with people who have gone through really crap times. And what the wisdoms does is turns that on its head and makes us hear it in people's words and really confront the reality.
And have you seen that where it has happened? Have you seen that effect change, where it's landed and people have been listened to? In what ways have you seen that effect change?
So we're only starting the process in Wales. So we're in the process of looking at how we can adopt that approach in platform, for example. And we've done, I suppose, our own version of wisdoms, which I know you talked about, the lessons from lockdown, which was looking at as a whole sort of housing, mental health sector together, what are the pieces of learning. So I'm pretty sure that will make a change, because hearing those words from people, their lived experience, is really powerful. The changes that have been made within Mayday Trust, for example, in terms of the way they work with people, the creation of their way of working, which is to, again, it sounds revolutionary, but it shouldn't be, but listen to people, don't try and fix people, but meet people where they are, walk with them. Those have made some really profound differences. So, I can share more kind of after this with people who are interested in contacting us, but it's sort of a watch this space answer, but also that, looking over the border into some of the partners of the New System Alliance, I think they've made big changes within their organisation as a result. Yeah.
So the other bit I'm interested in is you talked about this is for people at all people. There is no kind of, this isn't a New System Alliance to lobby government or a New System Alliance of practitioners wanting to change their practice. It could be all of those things. Is there I don't know, just do you want to explore that a bit more? Like, is there a reason why it's like that, and how you think you'll achieve more that way?
Yeah, so why do I think that? I think it's something I've just felt instinctively. I think it's because I've been part of times where we've worked with change from the bottom up, and it ends up meeting challenges from the top. Sometimes we work with change from the top down, and it meets the implementation gap. Which is a really passive-aggressive, policy wonk way of describing the fact that you didn't communicate it well enough. And actually, I just thought, right, let's cut out this middle mess and get everyone together. So that's, and to work with the willing, not to cut out or ignore people who aren't willing or who need convincing, but within an organisation to find a body of people, whether it's chief exec or a support worker or a receptionist or anyone, absolutely anyone, because I think that's the key thing with systems change and whole systems change is you can change. Let's look at trauma-informed approaches, for example, particularly again within the housing context. You can change the support side fairly easily because there's a shared language of support and care and compassion. But then when you try and work with rent arrears collection, housing officers, antisocial behaviour officers, you come up against a very different kind of brief people work towards very different purposes. But that doesn't mean that those people don't care and they aren't interested. So my view is you get everyone around the table. Doesn't matter how big the room is, you just make a bigger table and hear everyone's wisdom individually, and I really love the idea. I think there's something really powerful about having a chief executive sitting next to a support worker and the support worker being able to say, well, you keep saying that's absolute rubbish, because that's not how it works in this organisation. You think it is, but it's not. And I think that could really, create some really powerful conversations.
So I love that. It's not just about the transition. What did you call it? The implementation gap, which is, often blamed for why initiatives don't work. And it's kind of, but it's also that gap between rhetoric and practice, leadership and the front line, for want of so it's a way of leveling out all of those as being relevant to system change. And I guess that goes some way then, because some of this, I guess, is not comfortable. What we hear from people's lived experience is often not very positive about their experience of the system, and that must feel, sort of like, how much of that can you hear as a practitioner when you don't feel very powerful in being able to affect change? So I just wondered about your thoughts about this as a vehicle to help those people really who are, still motivated to do good, but recognizing that they're working in a system that perhaps doesn't work.
Yeah, I think people may want to edit this out, so if it doesn't get put in, then that's up to them. But I think as a professionalised workforce, we need to all turn into masochists, and we all have to be willing to hear bad things and enjoy it. And by that I mean, and I'm saying that deliberately bluntly, that we're not there to pretend that services or systems are good. And that they're going really well. And, one of my big worries is we get good feedback from people who go through services, but they've got this sort of gratitude within people who access services. So, of course, people are going to be grateful because they've been given support or help when they had nothing. And that's amazing and it's wonderful. And, we've all been part of groups or organisations that have used those stories to kind of further our own organisational agenda, but we've got to recognise that might not be people's genuine thoughts, or actually a year later they might think, oh no, that wasn't a good service, it was better than nothing. So I think we have to first of all be open to that negative feedback. We have to really listen, and it is difficult, and I think that's where having that equal playing field, so having the chief exec around a table, and actually showing that they are willing to be challenged as well. So it's that demonstrating, I think you talked in the previous presentation about the vulnerable leaders, and I think you said, who would want to be seen as a vulnerable leader? And I think that's correct. It's really hard to admit that. But by vulnerable, we think vulnerable is intrinsically bad, but actually vulnerable just means really that you're open, and actually we need to reframe it as open leadership, and that you're willing to be vulnerable. So you're willing to have a chief exec who sits in a meeting with 10, 20 people hearing about how crap they are, and that's okay, and hopefully then we'll make sure we've got the trauma-informed support around people to make sure it's safe and warm and therapeutic. But you've got to have the willingness to hear some bad stuff, otherwise we'll never change. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
Well, what you're making me think is that actually that's quite culturally radical. So whilst I love what if people are interested in joining the New Systems Alliance, they're not coming to get a toolkit of how to do change. They're coming to join a movement of like-minded people who know they want change, want to feel it out together. But there is something radical in what you just said anyway, because it sort of reminds me of what I was trying to get to about this sounds obvious, this sounds nice, this sounds simple, but actually if you imagine a cultural organisation where leaders are open to listening, to people not only who use their services regularly, but their staff and their staff's experience of those services regularly. And that is sort of systemically part of how you operate. That feels very different from where we're at now.
Yeah, and I think for me, so this comes under the list of things that I think is blindingly obvious, and that I haven't read anything that says this is a good idea. This is just, to me, a human thing to do, is that if you learn and grow, you'll be a better person. If you're a better person, you'll deliver a better service. And if you deliver a better service, then you'll have better outcomes for people. It just seems completely obvious. But what I'm learning through the New System Alliance and the rest of this work is that things that seem simple and human and normal to do, or typical, I shouldn't use the word normal, are hard to do because the system stops it. So, for example, if we imagine a vulnerable or an open chief exec talking about everything they're getting wrong, they can talk about what they get right as well, because I'm sure there are, people get loads of things right. Then what happens when they talk to their commissioner or their funders, or when they're trying to fundraise? You can't, at the moment, with the current system we have, win contracts if you brag about how much you get wrong.
Yeah.
So that's where the system change comes in, is that, yes, it seems really simple and human to just have open leadership, but actually when you start thinking about it, so much needs to change to allow that to happen, that it then starts getting almost impossible, I think. But that's what we're hoping to unlock with the Alliance.
So if people want to get in touch or know more, how do they do that?
So they can go to the newsystemalliance.org website, or you can email me on olivertownsend@platform.org.
We can put it all up. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks all.
Thank you.